Al, baby, it's your agent. I'm so sorry I missed you and got your answering machine instead. Listen, I hope you're not mad at me for not getting you that role in Gremlins 2. I just figured that you wouldn't even need to apply for the role. Oh well, you live and you learn. Anyway, do I have the role for you? It's for Atari. You know, the video game people. Well, they want to hire you to star in a video game for their 7800 system. I'm telling you, Al, being in video games is the next big thing. And it's Atari, so you know they're going to be around forever. So we're looking at sequels too. That means big money down the road for us. And all I need to do is send in one of your promo photos, and that's it. Easy money. But you're really going to love me for this part. I told them instead of money this time, just give us a percentage of the profits for their next system, the Panther. I mean, imagine if we got a piece of the pie from that Nintendo my kids keep playing. This Panther is the next big thing, and we'll rake in the cash for the sequels. Just you wait. Anyway, if you agree, just nod your head. You're nodding, right? Great, because I already sent them a picture. It was my last one, and I think I spilled a little ketchup by your mouth. Or was it ketchup?
On today's episode of the Atari 7800 Game by Game podcast, we will be talking about CX7880 Basketbrawl and CX7889 Midnight Mutants. Muhahaha.
Hey guys, welcome finally to the next episode and the final regular episode of the Atari 7800 Game by Game podcast. My name is Phil and I'm your host, and I do apologize for the long delays this summer. You know, when I was a kid, summer was like the easiest, most enjoyable time of the year. You're out from school, you don't have a lot to do. It meant that you could actually play a lot of Atari if you had a 7800 or 2600 or what have you during those times. But nowadays, it's almost become the busiest time of year. Visiting family, the kids are back from school, so you have to entertain them as well and make sure they're taken care of. And I just find myself more exhausted now during the summer than I do during the regular school year when the kids are actually in school and you don't have so much travel and family things going on. Summer's great. It's just really busy and been really difficult to get the large chunk of time I need to get the podcast done. I like to do the podcast in larger chunks than I do with my videos since the podcast itself is longer. But I was wondering if any of you guys or gals did what I used to do when I was a kid. I did this a couple times. My parents would go to my grandparents' cottage, and it was cool. Lots of swimming, lots of stuff to do outside. But once you were inside, if it was raining or something like that, there wasn't a whole lot to do. There was a few kids' books, not too many toys to play with. The television station only got a few channels that were kind of fuzzy depending on the weather. You had to adjust the rabbit ears and tune them just right, and you were lucky if you got 4 channels. And there wasn't a VCR, so I couldn't watch movies. So there was a few times I actually brought my Atari 7800 system with me on a family trip. And I'm wondering if anyone ever did that. I'm not just talking about to your neighbor's house. I think a lot of us did that. But did you ever take your system on a long trip? Maybe, a 4-hour drive or even a flight? If you ever did, I am curious about that. Write in, let me know at Atari7800podcast at AOL.com. Or, you could just drop me a line through one of the forums or on YouTube or on the Facebook page, and that'd be cool as well. But here it is, finally getting it done. I hope you guys enjoy today's episode. Let's go ahead and get to today's games.
Hold on, Phil. We just got a special transmission from Scott Rhodes, who used to work for Atari writing manuals among other things. He answered all the questions you gave him in a most excellent fashion.
Oh, that's great. That's really good. Let's go ahead and do our email interview. So let's see. I will be me and him. So what was your main job at Atari? How did you get it? Well, I was hired as a technical editor in the creative services department, but very quickly took on a lot of writing assignments when they discovered I could. Were you salaried or contracted? Did you get paid per manual? And if so, how much? Both. I was hired as a salaried employee. I left after about a year and a half, but continued to contract for them for a couple of years. I was paid per manual as a contractor, but I really don't remember how much. It wasn't a lot. It's funny, when they hired me, I figured it was something I could do for a while until I found a better writing job. I didn't want to be a tech writer. and I'm still doing it 28 years later, so I suppose I might as well make a career out of it. The job's been good to me, and it started there. Did you ever meet any of the Tramiels? If you did, what were they like? What was the atmosphere of working for Atari like in general? Yeah, I worked closely with Leonard a couple of times, most noticeably for Desk Set 2, which was his pet project. I also edited and ghost wrote some of the executive statements in the 1988 and 1989 annual reports, which put me in contact with Sam, but I can't say I knew him very well. He probably wouldn't remember me. Leonard might. Jack was once at a urinal next to mine, which surprised me for some reason. That was my closest contact to him. In general, the atmosphere was sometimes stressful and not always as much fun as you might imagine, unless you've heard stories. It was my first job out of college, so I didn't know better, but I put up with stuff I probably wouldn't put up with now, like shouting mattresses in the offices, overt sexism, and other stuff. Their cheapness was also stuff of legend. Like one time I went to a photo shoot for the TT-030 to help set up the computer. The ad had a back-to-school homework theme. The kid in the ad wore clothes with tags still on so they could return them after the shoot. I don't want to give a negative impression. I enjoyed working there mostly, and it led to a good career, but it was far from a dream job in those days shortly before the crash. And I worked with a number of odd characters, which actually made it more fun. Why did you leave Atari, and what are you doing now? Well, I left Atari because I was offered more money, with about a quarter of the commute. I was offered a raise and a promotion to stay, but I was ready for something new, and with 2 little kids and a newborn baby, I wanted the shorter commute. I'm currently the senior tech writer for Adobe. In between, I've worked for Everex and Novell, plus did a lot of freelance work for my own company. I stopped contracting when Novell transferred me to Utah, or maybe a little bit before. How did you approach writing manuals? Were you given the games to play with? Do you have a favorite manual on the 7800 or the Lynx? We were usually given the game about the time it was finished and had to write pretty quickly. I played the game as much as I needed to get a feel for the game and the controls. If I really liked the game, I played it more. My favorite parts of the process were coming up with a story and, if needed, character bios, like for the 7800 Basketbrawl, which was my favorite 7800 manual, and still gets me a little attention now and then, like this email. And mission descriptions. I tried to capture the feel of the game in the storyline. Some examples. I was given the programmer's story for Blue Lightning on the Lynx, which is your typical, you're the greatest pilot in the force and you need to save the world kind of thing. But when I played it, it was hard. So I turned in a manual with a story saying that you were chosen because you're a lousy pilot and you're expendable. Basically, that you have to learn to fly because that's what playing the game felt like. I put a lot of humor in the story and the mission descriptions. I expected to be told to tone it down, but John Scrutch loved it. My manager wasn't so crazy about it, but Scrutch told him to leave it as it was. He didn't. When the manual came back, much of the humor was gone. Although the basic storyline survived, Scrutch wasn't happy and neither was I, and my manager heard about it. The approach for the Lynx poster manuals were a little different. It was basically the same, play and then write, but I also storyboarded the posters in a way. Not drawing, I couldn't do that, but I describe each panel the way I thought the artist should draw it. I'm pretty sure Bill and Ted was the first of the posters. I enjoyed that one. I was able to channel my inner Bill and Ted. I loved the movie, and so did my 2 young sons, and use their language. Much like I added stereotypical California language to California games. I also came up with a somewhat ridiculous legend for Lynx Shanghai to try and make it feel more than another Mahjong game. I look at that and it's kind of funny now. Nothing in the legend is actually in the game. I had fun writing it though. It was long and I'm surprised I got away with it. After Blue Lightning, I pretty much had free reign. If I didn't like the game, like Batman Returns or whatever the Batman game was on the Lynx, I tended to play a lot less, but I still had to play it enough to write a good manual. Not liking the game made it a bit of a chore sometimes, and sometimes, especially toward the end of my time with Atari, they would dump 3 or 4 games on me at once and give me a few days to write them all. This was after they switched to little 4-page manuals, which left no room for creativity. For the 7800 games, I did wish I could remember more of them, but anything from late 88 to 90 would have gone through my hands either as a writer or an editor. I had an XEGS on my desk. I loved playing with that thing during my breaks. Do you have any other stories or thoughts you'd like to share concerning working for Atari? It's kind of fun to somehow become part of pop history by working there. If I had been more aware of that sort of thing, I would have hung on to the swag we got, the t-shirts and the stuff. I could point to 3 things where I was thrust into history, although I didn't know it at the time. The first thing is I was sent to Epic's headquarters in Foster City to pick up the Lynx prototype and take it back to Sunnyvale with stern warnings about getting back safely. Not me, the handy as it was called then. Don't stop. Don't get in an accident. Don't get out of the car to get something to eat or drink, with not so veiled threats about failing. The second thing is when people were having trouble removing the Lynx carts, the artist asked me to be the hand model for the drawing on the label on the back. So that's a drawing of my hand on the label. And finally, by working on the portfolio, I became one of the first people to use a handheld computer. Again, none of these were due to any special ability or activity on my part, but it's cool to have been at the right place at the right time. I also remember seeing Mick Fleetwood and Debbie Gibson touring the offices. Fleetwood was intimidating. Do you have any favorite Atari games? Adventure for the 2600. I still play that often. Any new device I get gets 2 things right away, Adventure and Zork. I no longer have any real Atari systems, but I have a flashback and a plug and play Atari games and emulators on the computer and mobile devices. I still enjoy an occasional game of Clax, Lynx especially, although the 2600 version is still fun too, and Chip's Challenge, neither of which I wrote, although I did edit them and was often challenged to a game of Clax on the arcade machine upstairs by the woman who wrote that manual. There are so many great Atari games that have held up though, despite the primitive technology, and I play them now with my 5-year-old grandson, who often asks or demands that we play Atari. And here we are a year ago, and right here he inserts a YouTube clip of him playing with his grandson that I will put on the Facebook page. I wish 7800 games would come out on some kind of retro device. There are a lot of those I'd love to rediscover. I never had a 7800, but I played them at the office. I also have 2 original Lynx boxes full of old baseball cards, but alas, no Lynx. I hope my long answers were at least somewhat interesting. I could tell a lot of stories, some of which I probably shouldn't tell, and I'm probably best suited for a Lynx podcast, but I had some involvement in the late 7800 games. I don't really have any 7800 stories, though. It wasn't emphasized much when I was there. That was a good time, even if it wasn't particularly easy place to work for. It was fun to tell people to leave me alone so I could work and then sit in my comfy chair and play Lynx games. And my eternal gratefulness, thank yous, and all those kudos and what have you to Scott Rhodes, I really appreciate that. That was really cool. Could you imagine like meeting Jack Trammell in the bathroom? I mean, that's just great. That's crazy. But it's amazing that he had all those little times where he was a part of history. You know, that's his hand on the back of Lynx cartridges and being one of the first people to use a handheld computer and having the Lynx prototype. Very, very cool. Thank you so much, Scott. I am very grateful. And now we can get to today's games, including Basketbrawl, which he wrote the manual for.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Justin from Atari.io, and you're listening to the No Swear Gamer on the Atari 7800 Game by Game podcast. And be sure to check out Atari.io for the very best in retro life and classic gaming. From Atari to Nintendo, Sega, TurboGrafx, and beyond. Atari.io.
Basketbrawl for your Atari 7800 Pro system.
All right, Basketbrawl from 1990. Can't find out who worked on the game as far as programming goes. If you know, you can let me know. Let's talk about the box. Very interesting. Not necessarily good, but definitely interesting. So you have Basketbrawl in kind of 2 shades of orange along the top, and it's like on a brick background, but the background of the actual scene of the box is like a greenish concrete. So it's kind of interesting there. It features a guy with a basketball getting punched in the face. Now the dude who's punching him in the face, you just see his fist. He has one of these 1980s black leather wrist bracelets that have a whole bunch of those pointy metal studs that were very popular at the time. And the guy getting punched, well, he has very white hair. Part of it's in a mohawk, but he has a full head of hair, so it's not just a mohawk. He has very thick black eyebrows. One of his teeth is getting punched out. You can see a little earring with a, what is that, pink French poodle hanging on his ear. He's wearing a tank top. He's got a basketball in his hand that has a boo-boo on it because it has a little X and white tape. A knife is coming at the basketball, so the basketball better duck. He has a tattoo on one of his shoulders that says "Born to Dribble." Ha ha ha! Get it, dribble. And he just looks like he's in a lot of pain. Lots of the cartoon stars coming out of him. And his left hand looks very bizarre. It has a skull ring on it, but like where the knuckles are, the joints are on your finger, it's very, very overemphasized. It looks like he has these massive warts all over his hands. Very, very, very scary. It's like, dude, don't touch me. If you touch that basketball, I'm not even touching that basketball. Is that contagious? Yeah, really kind of bizarre. On the back of the box, it says 2 can play together for use with the 7800 system and controllers. On the left-hand side, right-hand side, and there's a gray strip. So this is a newer style of box as opposed to the original style. You have 3 screenshots. They're pretty good. They show you 3 different scenes. So you got one on a kind of a sand lot, which is basically a junkyard. Actually, they have 2 of them, but the colors are off. So in the top one, the ground looks kind of a sandish brown, and in the bottom one, it looks more like a greenish, but I believe it's the same scene, so something happened to the color. And then you have one of them playing basketball on a roof. On the left side, it says slam, dunk, and jam, hoops with extra punch. Is it just a friendly game of 1-on-1 or 2-on-2? Basketball is street sports where you make up the rules. It takes a well-placed punch to steal the ball and precise timing to score a jam. Choose 1 of 6 brawlers at the start and collect power-ups for extra speed and punching power. 2 can play together in competition. Basketbrawl features super sharp, large character graphics. It's the latest programming technology brought directly to your home. And there you go. I don't know that you can make up the rules, but there are no rules. We got a 10-page stapled manual, which was written by Scott Rhodes, who we just heard from in the interview before. So again, you got the black and white. Looks kind of cool for the box art. Let's read what he wrote. Battle for the Hoop. In a desperate attempt to stop inter-city gang wars, the city leaders organized a basketball league. The league is scheduled to play on 3 courts, a street, a junkyard, and a rooftop. The mayor figured that a friendly game of hoops would be a much more peaceful way to settle disputes. Boy, was he wrong. You mean a politician got something wrong? Nobody could have predicted games like these. When rowdy gang members chased off the city-appointed officials, Scott the Blade Savage, I wonder if he's related to Randy. Oh yeah, a thug from a neutral gang stepped in. Is there such a thing as a neutral gang? I guess if they're just on their own. And what a referee he turned out to be. He doesn't care about fouls. He doesn't care about the rules. He doesn't even have a whistle. But he gets his kicks from throwing knives at players. With no real referee, the players can do whatever they please, and they do. Picture this play. Slash gets the ball and passes to Bruiser. Bruiser dribbles around a junk pile and breaks towards the basket while Slash mercilessly punches Vinny Simon. Simon steps in to protect Vinny and punches Slash. Bruiser takes a knife in the gut as he shoots. The ball is up, but no, he hits the bent rim and it bounces back. Vinny breaks free and he gets the rebound. He runs for the basket. A swift left hook from Bruiser and Vinny crumbles to the ground. The ball rolls loose. The 3 remaining players scramble for the ball in a fist-flinging free-for-all. Say that 5 times fast. Fist-flinging free-for-all. Simon comes up with the ball. Slash pounds on Bruiser's face for not moving faster. Simon dribbles down court unguarded and shoots for 2. No wonder the gang members nicknamed the game Basketbrawl. To them, this is not a game, it's a street fight. And then it tells you how to get started, how to hook up your system and whatnot. Yeah, so there you go. The standard thing, I won't bother reading that. Optional game controls to call timeout and pause the game. Press pause, repeat to resume play. To return to the character descriptions screen and restart the game with the previously selected game options, press reset, and to select new options, use select. Playing the game. Basketball is a fast-paced basketball simulation with a twist. The players on each team can try to knock the other cold with punches to the face. Meanwhile, the referee, Scott the Blade Savage, roams the sideline throwing knives at players. You can play 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 against the computer or a friend. You and a friend can also gang up on the computer. The object of the game is to outscore the opposing team. Each time you win, you are assigned a new challenger. The game ends when you lose the game or get knocked out cold. The game begins with the player at center court. The characters controlled by player 1 and 2 are marked by the words 1-up and 2-up. If you're playing 2-on-2 game, the 7800 controls the second player on each team. In a 1-player game, the 7800 controls opposing characters on the team. The action starts when the ball appears. Use the controller to move around the court. Use the fire button to pass, jump, shoot, or fight as described in the next section. Let's go to the next section using the fire buttons. Left button. If your character does not have the ball, the left button makes your character jump. Jump to block a shot or get a rebound. If your character has a ball, the left button causes the character to shoot. A successful shot depends on the distance to the basket and the character's health and shooting ability. Right button. If your character does not have the ball, the right button makes the character punch in the direction he's facing. Punching is an ideal way to steal the ball or protect a teammate. If you punch a character often enough, that player loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Since there are no substitutions in basketball, injured players are not replaced. Putting an opponent out of commission makes winning much more easier, and the referee couldn't care less. So, if you play a game and you take out one of your opponents, then it's down to 1-on-2. And if you lose your partner and you win the game, the next time you start a game, you're still playing 1-on-2. You don't gain the guy back. Pass the ball to your teammate in a 2-on-2 game. Quickly press and release the right button when your character has the ball. If you press and hold the button, you will perform a power throw. A power throw is a hard throw at another player. And in a 2-on-2 game, you can select your target. Hold down the right button when your player has the ball. Then push up on the controller until the desired character flashes. Release the button to throw. A successful power throw can easily injure an opponent. While you search for the correct target, action continues around you. Don't let an opponent punch you and knock the ball loose. And by the way, the power throw, personally, I found it to be hard to really pull off because, it's a fast-moving game, and here you are stopping and using up to aim and hold the button down to charge it. It just seemed kind of too cumbersome for my taste. Power-ups. During the course of the game, various icons representing the following power-ups appear on the court. Pick up an icon by running over it. Could it be any easier? These items increase the character's strength, speed, or power. Let's say milk. Everybody knows that milk makes a body strong. Picking up a glass of milk raises the character's health by 1 point up to a 9-point limit. A player collapses when his health reaches 0. Lightning bolt. Speed is one of a hoopster's most important abilities. Fleetness of foot allows a player to catch an opponent from behind and knock the ball loose by punching the other guy in the head. But wouldn't that give a concussion? The fast character can get the ball and break down court for a quick 2 points. Fist. Running over fist increases the character's power rating. A high power rating makes it easier to knock out an opponent cold with a good punch or power throw. And I will say this too, and maybe it says this in the manual, but these carry over from game to game. So if you play more than one game and you built up your speed, you won't slow down. You'll keep that speed. Basketbrawl offers a selection of 6 different characters, each with his own strengths and weaknesses. You can increase characters' health, speed, and power by running over the power icons. However, each character was born with certain shooting ability. Such things are genetic, and there's no way to increase a character's shooting ability. So here are the characters. Vinny Biticelli, I think that's how you say it. Biticelli. Maybe that's it. Vinny Biticelli was born mean. Vinny's father tried to soothe the boy's rage by enrolling him in a gym. While training for the Golden Gloves, Vinny heard about Basketbrawl. It was his dream come true, a chance to bust heads without wearing those sissy boxing gloves. His raw power and savage meanness make him a natural on the course. Vinny's favorite pastime is watching kung fu movies and chewing on barbed wire. Vinny's very fast and has average power, but he's so busy bashing heads, he never takes the time to practice his shooting. Eric Buster Williams had a dream. For as long as he could remember, Buster Williams planned to play professional hoops. He practiced day and night, 7 days a week, and he was hot. But his practice got in the way of his schoolwork. Then came a tragic accident. Since he never went to school, he couldn't read the warning label on the electric razor. When he tried to shave in the shower, he got the shock of his life. Something in the surge of electricity turned Buster into a bloodthirsty madman and a lousy shooter. Now he terrorizes the basketball courts, dribbling heads instead of basketballs. Buster's an average shooter. He's not very strong, but he's quick. I'm enjoying these character bios. I could assume that if you got a 10-page manual with this game, most gamers, when you get a game, you don't read the manual, you just pop it in. And as a kid, the time I'd read a manual was, you go to Toys R Us, you get your game, and then on the car ride home, I would open up the game and read the manual on the way home. But after that, I didn't read it that much. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people who got the game missed out on some of these bios. Let's talk about Jerome / Gordon, get it slash instead of flash, was raised in a high-rise uptown apartment. His mother is a wealthy wealthy brain surgeon. His father made a fortune on Wall Street. Little Jerome wanted nothing to do with the world of the wealthy. He rebelled by joining a punk rock band and changed his name to Slash. One night while dancing the pogo, Slash discovered his natural jumping ability. He soon learned to use that skill on the basketball court. Slash's deepest secret, he owns 40% of a major computer corporation and 3 designer neckties. Slash is the best shooter in the city, but his speed and power are merely average. Bruce Bruiser Johnson was born in the heart of Brooklyn and learned to be tough at an early age. Isn't that sweet? His mother used to steal his dresser, or used to, this manual's kind of faded, his dresser every night, but steal his dresser? I don't know what that says. His mother used to steal his dresser every night, but Bruiser got even. While his mother grew fatter by the day. Oh, his mother used to steal his dessert. I'm sorry. I'm reading the scan and it's kind of like, it's like a bad Xerox. He used to steal his mom used to steal his dessert, and while his mom grew fatter by the day, Bruiser worked out at the local gym. One night after dinner, Velma reached for her son's Jolly Donut. Bruiser lifted her by the ear and threatened to throw her out the window. Now she's always given him her dessert. Bruiser hobbies includes breaking down doors with his head, writing love poems to his kitten. Hear that, Ferg? Bruiser is more powerful than any other basketball player and has average speed and shooting ability. Tommy Biff Torrance first surfed when he was knee-high to a sea lion. Growing up in Southern Cal was like living in paradise. Then his dad got transferred to New York. At first, Biff was like totally stoked. He thought Long Island would be surrounded by gnarly waves. When he hit the city, he was bummed to the max. Where Biff thought he'd find surf, he found asphalt and boredom. So he joined a gang. The other gang members put him down because he said dude instead of yo. Then they saw him play basketball. He could dribble, shoot, throw elbows with the best that the city had to offer. Now, thanks to Basketbrawl, Biff no longer sits at home watching old Frankie and Annette movies. Even though Biff's grandma can run faster than he can, and she's been dead for years, he has good power. He's also an average shooter. And then finally, we got Simon Smart Guy, who grew up believing that he had no athletic ability. That is until the day he tried a physics experiment. With his slide rule, compass, pocket calculator, and various other school tools, he discovered that the trajectory of a basketball is exactly equal to the velocity times the barometric pressure divided by the square root of the wind chill factor. Now he can shoot like a pro. He also enjoys measuring the amount of force a basketball player's face has in relation to Simon's right hook, while both players run at full speed directly toward each other in his spare time. Simon is writing a book about the science of basketball called The Free Throw Factor Friction. Simon's calculations paid off. He is a good shooter with average power. Unfortunately, advanced calculus doesn't help him run very fast. Now, here's some strategy for you kids. Learn to exploit each character's strengths and weaknesses. Knowing the abilities of your teammates and opponents will help with your game plan. If you fall behind, start throwing punches. When you are on the offense, note the best defense is a dead defense. If you knock your opponent out for the game, listen for the power-up sounds when you roll up the points. Picking up icons will make you stronger for the next game. Learn to pass in 2-on-2 games. No defense is ever prepared for a fast break. Avoid blades and knives. A knife in the gut can ruin a perfectly good layup. Basketball scoring is just like basketball. A successful shot is worth 2 points. There are no 3 points. In addition, players receive points for various basketball activities as shown in the table below. So if you punch successfully, you get 10 points. Picking up the milk fist or lightning gets you 20. Making a basket is 50 points, and winning a game is 250. So not only do you have basketball scoring, you have points as well. Let's talk about the graphics. At the beginning, you have a group of 3 kids kind of on a sidewalk. You have Basketbrawl kind of spray painted white against this brick wall that the guys are hanging on. There's a boombox on the bottom. 2 of the guys look really mean. You got one guy who's bald with a green shirt. He's pointing at you. Looks like he's ready to pick a fight. Another guy behind him's got his back and he has a basketball and a white tank top. And then there's another guy. It looks like he's wearing like a nice collared shirt, just sitting down, chilling out. Not sure what's up with that. Maybe he's one of those smart guys. So the options screen, when you get to the options screen, you can pick either 1 or 2 players. You can also pick which player the teams are on, if they're on Team 1 or Team 2. I think they can play together, but I didn't try this as a 2-player game. And then you can pick a game mode, either 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, and then difficulty, easy, medium, or hard. And then you have a game time, so you can select a minute, 3 minutes, or 6 minutes. Reminds me a bit of one-on-one basketball. I mean, different looking, but very simple screen. And then you have your character selection screen where you got like these little face, kind of like Street Fighter 2-ish, where you got a little square with the face of the person in it. So you can pick Vinny, Buster, Slash, Bruiser, Biff, or Simon. And by the way, the computer will choose your partner in a one-player game. And then as far as the game screens, you got the three kind of backgrounds, as I said. One is like broken up concrete, looks beat down. Another one is the junkyard. You can see some junk in the background. And then you have the roof. And the referee kind of goes back and forth on the bottom, throwing knives. Looks like he's scratching his back all the time. And he kind of looks like Rambo, too. He's got like a bandana on, but you never see his face. As far as the characters, they look decent enough. Each one has their own look, which is cool. And at the bottom of the screen, you can see the score. And there's a number by each character representing their health points, where you start at 90, and if you get down to 0, the person's knocked out on the ground, and they're no longer any good for the rest of the game, so that their partner is on their own at that point. And that's pretty much it. At the end of a game, you get a little status screen showing you how many points you earned, and sometimes you can see the stats of the health, the speed, and the power as well. One thing that did happen to me once is I think my partner got knocked out, and somehow I got stuck with the ball, or he had the ball and I couldn't get it to shoot anymore. It was really weird. It only happened one time. Music and sounds, you have a really cool opening theme. I really like this, but there's no in-game music, and the sounds of the game to me are just okay. Check it out. Atari Age gives us a Rarity 5, Digital Press of Rarity 4. 5 seems more fitting for this one. There was 2 external reviews on Atari Age, one for 80%, one for 68%, average score 74%. There was no high score club entry on this game. On eBay, this game has barely come up at all. You could get new copies for $50. There was one loose copy that came out in May that sold for $22, and one that showed up in July that sold for $35. And of course, this was not a game I owned. Okay, that's Basketbrawl. Let's move on to Midnight Mutants. Hello,
this is Greg, aka Soulblazer, co-host of the Super NES podcast, and listening to Phil on the Atari 7800 Game by Game podcast. I really enjoyed this podcast, despite not having 7800 back in the... this is stupid. I can't say that phrase, thanks to Ferg. I can't say another phrase to give credit to someone else, thanks to Nermix. I can't mention that Mr. Digging game, thanks to Phil. I need a friggin' scorecard to keep track of what I can say. For the record, I have no pet peeves, with the possible exception of calling Super NES a sneeze. That's just stupid.
Midnight Mutants for your Atari 7800 Pro system. Which I guess makes sense. This is an Atari 7800 podcast after all.
All right, before we get on to Midnight Mutants, I want to talk about Al Lewis, who is the celebrity endorser of the game. They just endorsed him. He's known for playing Grandpa Munster on the Munsters TV show back in the 60s. And the character, of course, is kind of like Grandpa Munster, but they can't call him that. They call him Grandpa, or Gram with an M paw instead of Grandpa. So it looks like Grandpa Munster, but officially it's not. So you can see what they're kind of doing there. So it's not a Munsters game. But he lived to the age of 92. He passed away in 2006. He, of course, was an actor. He later would do a role on TBS, where he was a host of Super Scary Saturday Nights. And the character he was inspired the Gremlins 2 character of Grandpa Fred. He was also a political figure of sorts. He ran as a Green Party member for the governor of New York in 1998. And he didn't really do that well, but he did well enough that the Green Party of New York got an automatic ballot line for the next 4 years because of how successful he was. And he was he was, pretty happy about his success considering that he didn't have a lot of support behind him. And also he, on the TV show, he seems like a friendly grandpa, but I guess he was a little bit of a dirty grandpa. He appeared on the Howard Stern show back when you weren't supposed to and dropped a lot of F-bombs and until they could wrestle the microphone away from them. So it's interesting. Some of the guys, they seem so friendly on TV, and then you hear about what they're like in real life. They seem like Mr. Rogers, if you will, and then they're more like Howard Stern when you talk to him. So interesting character there. So that is Grandpa. Now, the Midnight Mutants game came out in 1990. Now, according to Atari Protos, it was programmed by Peter Adams. Tammy Moore did the story. Paul Webb did the sound and music. I believe he did lots of other sound and music too. Adam Clayton and Rich Robbins were supporter. Les Pardue did the artwork. And but I only found that at Atari Protos. Not sure where they got that. It was programmed by Radioactive Software, is given credit. So they worked for Radioactive Software. They also worked on Eliminator Boat Duel on the NES. Outside that, they really didn't do much of anything. And for some reason, the name of the game is given copyright credit to the SNK Corporation in the manual. So I don't know why. I have no idea why Midnight Mutants belongs to SNK. I didn't see a Neo Geo game. If anyone knows, let me know. I couldn't find out why. And this is considered the final release of the 7800, which is fitting because it's the final game we're going over officially released. All right, so let's talk about the box. I think the box looks really cool. You have this nice kind of Midnight Mutants. It's in yellow, but it's kind of like that midnight horror movie kind of looks like blood or paint dripping kind of font. And there's this midnight kind of background, but there's a lot of blue. The clouds are a lot of blue, and I actually think it looks nice. If it was just black, it probably wouldn't look as good. You have a full moon in the background, a group of about 5 bats flying out of the moon. Well, not actually out of the moon, but they're in front of the moon. And then you have Grandpa, G-R-A-M-P-A, not Grandpa, Grandpa. And he looks like Grandpa Munster, basically. He's smiling. He looks pretty young, and he's got some red liquid coming down the side of his mouth. And his smile kind of reminds me of the Joker. Like, if you just covered his face and looked at his smile, it looks like the Joker. It really does. So there you go. On the back, it says Midnight Mutants on the top. On the right-hand side, we have 3 screenshots. 2 of them are boss battles. So one is against a skeleton who has eyeballs flying at you. The other is against Dr. Evil, who looks kind of like a Dracula, like Count Chocula's, evil uncle, if you will. And then one of them is the normal gameplay screen in one of the caverns where you're fighting a couple of ghouls. Can you save Grandpa from plasmic prison? 7800 arcade adventure like you've never seen before. Well, I wouldn't call this an arcade style game, but I understand. The game has it all. Places like rivers, deep, dark forests, creepy caverns, labs, creatures like vampires, mutant zombies, and menacing bats. Your adventure includes exploring large areas and finding awesome weapons. A press of the button brings an instant on-screen hints and tips. It all adds up to awesome action with mega graphics. That sounds like a Sega thing that they do with the Master System. Grandpa's back, and it's up to you to wipe out the monsters and clean up. Where was Grandpa before? For use with the 7800 system and controller. And it says here on the bottom, it says Midnight Mutants is licensed from Pixel Software Incorporated. So there's another company. I don't know anything about where this game came from, because I originally, before I started researching this game, I thought Atari made it all themselves. They just hired someone else to do it, but it's licensed out. So very interesting about that. And this is the reason why odds are you'll never see Midnight Mutants in any other form, because who knows who really owns it. It doesn't sound like Atari owns it solely. So even if they made a 7800 flashback, they'd have to track down who really owns this game. And of course, you have Al Lewis's endorsement of this game. That license probably ran out too, so you'd have to find someone from Al Lewis's estate who could approve redoing this game. This game will probably stay on the 7800 forever only, unless you do emulation, and of course it's only legal if you own the game, but I don't see any legal emulation of this game ever happening, which is kind of a shame. Stapled manual, black, white, and red, which looks really good with this box art. It makes the skies darker. I like both the box art and the manual. Let's read the manual. On a strange Halloween night, October 31st, 1747, the cold October wind rattled through bare branches. Jonathan Harkman, Witchfinder General, thought it sounded like the clatter of dead bones. He pulled his high collar snug against the cold, and he and his small party crossed the hard ground. They were all quiet, save one, Dr. Evil. His hands bound behind his back, screeched and shouted as he was escorted to his death. "You're all going to pay." His voice squeaked like the rusted hinges of a door to a crypt. "Each and every one of you," he shouted, looking around at his captors, his mouth frozen into a twisted grin. His eyes glowed feral red. There's no doubt in the Witchfinder's mind that Dr. Evil was a powerful warlock. Well, hello, his name's Dr. Evil. "Don't fight it," the Witchfinder General whispered. "It's God's will." Dr. Evil laughed. Then abruptly he glared at the Witchfinder. "You're going to pay most of all." It took 3 men to tie him to the stake. He fought with demonic strength, screaming and cursing and prophesying. Jonathan Harkman crossed himself, looked heavenward, then lit the pyre. October 31st, 1992. Jimmy was in luck. His parents had been called away on a business trip, so he got to spend the week with Grandpa. It wasn't just any week, though. It was Halloween week, and Jimmy didn't know anyone who was more fun at Halloween than his grandpa. His grandpa celebrated Halloween like most people celebrated Christmas. He decorated the house, bought gifts for families and friends, and worked in his laboratory creating special elixirs and potions. Jimmy liked watching his grandpa work in the lab. Is this a meth lab? I mean, come on, parents, where are you at? I mean, Grandpa's making his special potions in the lab. Parents. Even though he didn't know what his grandpa was up to, he enjoyed watching him add carefully measured quantities to the bubbling vats and beakers of green and gray liquid. But this year something was different. His grandpa seemed troubled as he frantically mixed and refined his potions. "Are we going to get a pumpkin?" Jimmy asked, afraid of his grandpa forgetting. Grandpa placed a beaker he'd been examining on the counter, gave the boy's shoulder a warm squeeze. "Of course," he said. "Get your coat." It was dusk when they arrived at Lansale's pumpkin and squash patch. Though it was Halloween evening, there was still a lot of pumpkins to choose from. Jimmy got down on his hands and knees and examined each one carefully, looking for the perfect carving pumpkin. Suddenly, an enormous pumpkin that had been part of Lansale's Halloween display exploded. Grandpa ran to Jimmy's side. Neither could believe what they were seeing. In the spot where the pumpkin had been stood a tall, slender man. The Slender Man! Oh, my goodness! Oh, the 7800 manual predicted the Slender Man. I know it's like popular, but not in a good way, but Anyways, dressed in antique clothing. Not a fan of the Slender Man or what some people have done in his name, but isn't it crazy that we hear about that now? I never heard about it as a kid. I don't know the history of that. Don't really care, but hey, it's in the manual. He was outlined in blue flames, and his hair moved on its own, twisting and turning in the night, air like the living rocks of Medusa. This is like a rock and roll concert. Jimmy suddenly understood why his grandpa had been so agitated. He had sensed the evil in the air. "I said that I'd be back," Dr. Evil growled. He looked at the confused expression on the old man's face. "You don't know me," he continued, "but your great-great-grandfather did, and I promised him I'd be back for him." Cold blue flames flickered about, lapping his ankles and shins. "Since he's not here," Dr. Evil said as he raised a badly burned hand, "you'll have to do." A bolt of blue fire leapt from his fingertips and hit Grandpa squarely in the chest and knocked him off his feet. As he struggled to get up, Grandpa's skin began to glow a bright orange. Then things got really weird, as piece by piece a pumpkin formed around him, trapping him in a plasmic pumpkin prison. Jimmy ran to his grandpa's side, but he couldn't free him of the vegetable prison. He turned towards Dr. Evil, ready to reason, to beg. But Dr. Evil was no longer there. He vanished just as quickly as he came. Jimmy knew that he was the only one who could save his grandpa. And though he was confused and afraid, he was certain that if he was going to save his grandpa, it would have to be tonight, Halloween. All right, so what a setup. That's quite a backstory. So basically, you turn on the game and you press a fire button. Let me recall. It doesn't say it. I don't think no difficulty. It's one standard mode of difficulty. Using your controller, you use it to move Jimmy, use a currently selected weapon, or create a psychic link with your grandpa. Move the controller stick right, left, forward, or back to maneuver Jimmy. The left fire button activates the currently selected weapon. The right button is used to contact Grandpa. The Grandpa help screen. He has a powerful psychic power. Trapped in the plasmic prison, his powers have been weakened. From time to time, if Jimmy concentrates really hard, he can make psychic contact with Grandpa. At these times, Grandpa may be able to offer assistance. Press the right fire button to make contact with Grandpa. If Grandpa has advice for Jimmy, it will appear on screen besides a picture of him. Press the right fire button again to return to the field of play. So in this sense, you press right and it's a pause button. And a screen comes up and you see Al Lewis and he gives you sometimes hints or just says something. He always has something to say. Grandpa's screen will also show all the items and weapons you've collected. In order to use an item, they must be selected first. Only one item may be selected at a time. Brackets surround the currently selected item. To change the currently selected item, move the brackets using the controller until the bracket frame is in the desired item. Pressing the right fire button will return you to the play field. There are areas to explore in the map, 10 to be exact. Use the map to help Jimmy find the important items he'll need to overcome his foes and save Grandpa. The fountain is a starting point. The basement of the mansion contains a lab. Jimmy will discover 3 useful items while in the mansion: the knife, the blaster, and the key. The church. To the right of the fountain is a church. Inside, he will find an item that will protect him from poisonous bites of bats. The cabin located in the depths of the wood. Jimmy will need to investigate the cabin. While you're there, don't forget to check the well. Stables and barn. When you find stables and barn, enter via the bush that casts no shadow. Take the axe with you when you enter the barn and watch out for hungry wolves. Graveyard crypt. Take a key and the blaster with you to get into the graveyard. Pumpkin patch. Keep your eyes open or Jimmy will be left out in the dark. Fireplace and caverns. Reach from the cabin. Jimmy needs a lantern and a powerful weapon to explore the caverns. Find the diamonds below the cliffs. Optional game controls. You can press pause to pause the game, and to return to the opening screen you can press reset. Playing the game. You move Jimmy through his hometown, picking up valuable items and destroying the enemies. He must also find and destroy mutant bosses and finally Dr. Evil himself. At the bottom of the play screen is your status bar that will let you know how you're doing. Health. Jimmy's health is displayed on the gauge. Don't let the monsters touch you. Any contact will lower his health. When the health gauge reaches 0, the game is over. So this is a single life game. Blood. This game shows the purity of Jimmy's blood. Bats and ravens will inject impurities into his bloodstream if they bite him. When the blood purity reaches 0, the game is over. So basically you have 2 kinds of health meters or bars, and either one can end your game. Items in the lower left-hand corner will display your item, and then the score will show you the number of points. And by the way, the game is played from kind of an isometric view. It's not a true isometric, because the way you move, it's not like Landstalker on the Genesis, but there's a lot of times where you push up and you're kind of going diagonally up or diagonally down. But when you go left or right, it's pretty straight, if that makes sense. So that's why it's not true isometric. And the manual actually shows you a nice little map of where everything's at and where to find stuff. It's very helpful. And it looks kind of like it was drawn almost by like a middle schooler, but I like it. I think it looks really cool, and it shows you where items are found and some of the enemies, and I like the map. Let's see, lab caverns. Reach from the mansion. Jimmy will find the Mega Blaster, necklace, and diamond in the caverns. Explore the shipwreck. Dark fields. Jimmy will find diamonds here. Items to find and pick up. So there are items like potions that are either red or blue. Jimmy can carry only 1 potion of each color at a time. That's just like Zelda, right? Red or blue. If he discovers a new potion of a color he already has, the new potion will be saved and the old one will be automatically used. Red potions improve Jimmy's blood purity by 50. Blue restore his health. These potions are especially helpful when battling bosses. Knife can be found inside the mansion. He can use the knife to kill bats. The cross can be found in a church. He can use it to protect him from the bats until he finds the axe. So when you have the cross on and you're using that, it's not an offensive weapon, it's defensive, but when bats touch you, it doesn't hurt you at all. Axe has twice the power of the knife. Isn't that kind of like Friday the 13th on the NES? Jimmy will find the axe in the cabin in the woods. He will need the axe to fight the first mutant boss. The blaster is located in the basement of the mansion. Jimmy must destroy all the zombies before the blaster appears. He'll need the blaster to fight off the enemies and the second mutant boss. The key, he will need the key to enter the crypt. He will find it in the second floor of the mansion. A lantern lights Jimmy's way through caverns and dark fields. The lantern's in the pumpkin patch. Mega Blaster can be found in the dead end area of the caverns near the lab entrance. Jimmy will need the Mega Blaster to destroy Dr. Evil. Necklace, find the necklace and Jimmy can get the heart in the fountain. It is found in the ship wreck in the caverns. The necklace also reduces all mutant boss damage in half. The heart permanently purifies Jimmy's blood as he tracks Dr. Evil. The heart is at the center of the fountain but cannot be retrieved until the necklace is found. And then diamonds will appear and when you destroy some enemies, and they increase how much health you can have. Mutant bosses, during his quest, he must battle huge, seemingly indestructible creatures known as mutant bosses. And I believe there's 3 of them, and they take up a large part of the screen. Graphically, it's really impressive. You must find the weak spot when you fight him, even though they seem indestructible. When he scores a hit, the boss flashes. The flash lets you know that the mutant boss can be hurt. The health of the mutant boss is shown at the top of the screen. Hints: get the knife, cross, and the axe. You'll need these items first, then get the blaster and the key. There's a warp hole just outside the cabin. The warp hole takes you to the corral. You must have the axe to fight the first boss inside the corral. The second boss is in the graveyard. You'll need to use the key to enter. You'll also need the blaster or Mega Blaster to defeat him. And you can't get the blaster until you destroyed all the zombies in the basement of the mansion. The key won't appear upstairs in the mansion until you destroyed all the zombies in the bedroom. You will need a necklace hidden in the shipwreck before you can get the heart in the fountain to increase your power. Sometimes you can get more powerful weapons earlier in the game. If you become better at Midnight Mutants, you'll be able to advance the areas more quickly and take shortcuts. The necklace is in the caverns by the laboratory. Reach through the mansion's basement. You'll need the lantern to enter the caverns, so secure that before attempting to find a necklace. There is a shipwreck which contains a necklace which will allow you to go in the fountain for the heart. The heart will increase your power. Scoring: points are earned for picking up items, destroying foes, but the ultimate goal is to destroy the mutant bosses one by one until you reach Dr. Evil. Destroying Dr. Evil will free Grandpa from his plasmic prison. So there you go. Much more, as far as action-oriented games, much more complicated. You got to find items, use it. There really wasn't a lot of games like this on the 7800. I can't even think of very many off the top of my head. I don't know if there was any quite like, I mean, there was none quite like this. It's like, it plays a lot. Basically, this is the system's Legend of Zelda. Slightly different point of view, and you can't save. But more or less, this is Zelda. Find items, access areas, beat the boss, find more items, access new areas, beat the boss. This is the closest we had to Legend of Zelda, though it's not a Legend of Zelda ripoff. It plays much different. When you start the game, you have a nice house in the background. You see the pumpkin patch, and then the story plays out where the guy is burned at the stake. He says he will return, and then he comes back. So one of the probably the darkest thing seen in a 7800 game as far as spookiness. A guy getting burned at the stake. I mean, it's just like a puff of smoke, but still. As I said, the game is played from a kind of a 3/4 perspective. It's a slanted perspective, might be better than it is. Your character looks nice. Everything looks nice. Grandpa looks like he does on the box cover in a bit. Well, his face is much more flesh colored than white colored, and he has very nice sideburns and no blood on his lips. But it looks good. And there's a lot of things that are seen on the screen as you're walking around. You'll hear like little sayings that Grandpa's saying as you're walking around. You'll see these little, sometimes humorous things. They're very cute. The monsters, the zombies, they look kind of bluish, except there's one that has like a light bulb on his head, and it makes sense to me. The bats look like bats. The bosses are huge. You got one that looks like basically the head of a goat, just the skeleton of it. No flesh at all. Then you have the skull with the eyes coming out, and then the guy who looks like evil Count Chocula. And this is a nice looking game. It really is. And bosses are just really huge. I don't know if you could have pulled this game off on the NES. It would have been interesting to see. Maybe you could have. This looks more like a Master System game than an NES game to me, especially the bosses. Really good looking. They're pushing the system. And music and sounds, well, I like the music. I like the music at the beginning. I like the music while you're playing. Yep, there's music in the background. All sounds really good. Check this out. Atari Age gives us a rarity 3, digital press a 4. I would put this at least a 4. I thought it was rarer than Basketbrawl, but when I was doing eBay searches, it actually came up more often than Basketbrawl. So I guess this is under, one under Basketbrawl. External reviews, we have, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. The lowest score was 80%. 90% was the high. Average score of 86, which is really good. For the high score club at Atari Age, Midnight Mutants, Nikon, Liduario, and Uyama Family all scored 9,999,990 points, which I'm guessing is the highest. On eBay, loose copies were going for 33 to 40, complete we're going for 40 to 46, and new we're going 40 to 60. So this is one of the higher rated games. And of course, I did not own this because I'd already probably had a Sega Genesis by the time it came out. You got to remember, 1990, Sega Genesis is out. The Super Nintendo, we're hearing rumors about that in Japan. Just to give you an idea how late the game is. It's a shame that games like this didn't come out during the heyday because they might have got a little more attention for the 7800. This is the most NES-like game that I can think of on the system, because on the NES you had a lot of games that were story games. Basically, you're trying to complete the story. You do a level, face a boss, do a level, face a boss, use items, stuff like that, and it does really play kind of like a... To me, it's kind of like Legend of Zelda meets Landstalker on the Genesis, if you ever played those two. Now, it probably takes if you're speedrunning it, maybe 30, 45 minutes. The game probably takes a good hour to play through. And one of the hard parts about getting ready for this game was I don't have a lot of time. And it really could have used a save feature, or a password would have been nice, something where I didn't have to backtrack. That's the one thing that kept me from getting deeper in the game, is I would only have 20 minutes to play, and that's not enough, and I can't even get too far. Also, the werewolves or the dogs, I found them to be extremely hard to defeat. Every time they attacked me, I couldn't figure out what to do to get them off me. I don't know if there's anything I could do. If you know, let me know. But other than that, very interesting game. Okay, so that's the two games. Let's go ahead to listener feedback.
Hey everybody, this might be Jimmy G.
And this might be Sean.
And we might be involved with the Pie Factory podcast. And when we're not doing our show, we may or may not be listening to Ferg and or Phil on either the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast
or the Atari 7800 Game by Game podcast. Ferg or Phil. That reminds me of back in the day how I used to have to get my burger fill. Cheeseburgers.
Really, mister, I do not know what you are doing with that.
There was a I between Mr. and I do something like, "Hey, Mister, do you know what you're saying?" Or,
let me think. Wow, that's awkward.
Once again, in our darkest hour, you come to our rescue. It's time for listener feedback.
Okay, over at the forums at Atari.io and Atari Age, I asked the members there to rate these games using a 4-point scale. If it's a top 5 game on the system, it's a Hall of Fame game. Next is a solid game, so a really good game, a game you should definitely consider getting for the system. Then comes a meh game that really just didn't do anything for you. And then a bottom 5 game on the system is a trash game. So first up, Atari.io, I heard from Justin, the founder of the website there. My biggest issue with Midnight Mutants was that it felt clunky. Graphically, it was great for the 7800. There's just something about the character and sprites in it that just felt clunky and not, quote, on par with the NES when it really could have been. It was an awesome game and something that should have come to the 7800 much sooner than it did. Malik Zero said, me at a party? Did you know that Al Lewis has his own video game for the Atari 7800? Yeah, the Al Lewis. Hey, where you going? My 7800 ain't by the fire exit. That's pretty funny. He's at a party and they don't care. I always consider Midnight Mutants to be Atari's answers to Fester's Quest on the NES. I didn't think about that. Yeah, it is a bit like Fester's Quest. That's a good point. Sadly, unlike Fester's Quest, Al Lewis, aka Grandpa Monster, isn't a playable character, and to my knowledge, the rest of the Munster family is nowhere to be seen. Yeah, because it's not a Munster game, which is a real shame since Lily is my personal favorite. Without playing the game, my impressions is that the title exists mostly for collecting purposes, whether it be for Atari games or Munsters merchandise, which means I want it badly for two reasons. As for Basketbrawl, I'm biased. Any sport title that allows you to forgo the rules and say, psh, who needs a goal, make a goal or basket? I'm just going to punch that loser in the face. A+ Hall of Fame all the way. Over at Atari Age, Toilet Tunes says Basketbrawl, meh or solid. Nothing wrong with it, but nothing special. You'd think a basketball fighter would be a bit more something. Midnight Mutants is solid, a nice enough run around and find things game. It could use more things to find and better animation. Heck, you have no animations on the boss screen. What's up with that? And by the way, I forgot to mention Basketbrawl a few years later after it came out on the 7800 came out on the Lynx, so they weren't side by side, and the Lynx version definitely looks a lot more polished, at least graphically speaking, which you'd expect. Jinx says Brawl is solid, good enough for an 8-bit game. Mutants is Hall of Fame. It is legendary, and there should be a part 2 or 3. Actually, we should have the 15th version today of it in high def on modern consoles, all done by the original authors on the same amount of drugs that must be smoked throughout the development cycle to keep it retro. Okay! Drac is back. Midnight Mutants Hall of Fame. One of my absolute faves on the system. Lots of depth, quirky humor, good use of limited sound chip boss characters. I think it was the last official game for the 7800 in North America, which is a way to go out. Absolutely love it and play it every Halloween. And by the way, his little profile he uses for Atari Age is one of the boss battles. Basketbrawl is solid, controls a little stiff, the scrolling is a little weird, but I always found it amusing. Found amusement in this goofy game. Graphics were great, not a classic, but I really liked it, so it's solid for me. Save 2600, Basketbrawl, meh plus to solid. What Toilet Tunes said is how I feel about it. Might be the best sports game on the system, but that's not exactly a glowing endorsement. Should be more fun than it is, but it's not. Midnight Mutants is solid. It's a game that I would like to a lot more than I do, but something's missing. A must-have for the system for sure, but I wish it was a little deeper. Good enough game considering the system's original releases and the theme with Grandpa bump it up a notch for uniqueness. We'll have to give it another try someday and see if I still get bored lumbering around the screen killing bats, lol. King Atari. Basketbrawl is solid. Had it once. Later, stupidly sold it. Not a bad game. I like the quirky concept. Midnight Mutants Hall of Fame easily. I love Midnight Mutants. It's everything that I feel a 7800 game should be. Fairly big quest, engrossing plot, great atmosphere, good graphics and sound. The presence of Al Grandpa Lewis just makes it all the better and gives the proceedings a unique quirky vibe. Quirky seems to define many of the later 7800 titles, which I really, really like. Honestly, if it was the last US 7800 game, this to me is the game for the console. Y'all can keep your NES Star Tropics. I'm going to rescue Grandpa from a plasmic pumpkin. Inky from Pie Factory says the only thing that keeps Midnight Mutants from being a Hall of Fame game is the lack of a save or password feature. I agree. It's a great adventure style game and it's hard as all get out, but it really needs some way to store your game so you can come back to it. For me, that would be a big plus. Thinking about this game further, it seems to me that if a setting was transported back to the medieval days of yore, it would be a sequel to 2600 Adventure. In my humble opinion, it plays exactly like what an adventure sequel should play like. And then Dauber, also from Pie Factory, said, forgot to mention Midnight Mutants in my audio submission, which we'll hear later. Midnight Mutants could be a Hall of Fame game, in my humble opinion, but it's got too many faults, in particular the collision detection when you try to protect yourself against the bats and other enemies. You have to be 1,000,000,000% precise, and maybe the game will decide that you might have hit your target. And the game would have greatly benefited from some sort of save mechanism like battery backup or something. Heck, if you could have a little high score device that can plug into the joystick port of the 7800 and have it save your high score, I own such a device. Surely a similar device could be devised to save your game position. But I'm going to rate Midnight Mutants a meh. It has a lot of potential, but to be quite honest, I hardly go back to it. I just don't have the patience to have to start fresh every time and refight the bats every time. I understand. And when he gave it a meh, Drac is Back called it blasphemy. Thursday 83 says, love both these games. Midnight Mutants Hall of Fame. Basketbrawl salad. Gambler 172 says, Brawl is salad. Midnight Mutants absolutely top, so I guess that's Hall of Fame. Trevor says, Basketball's Hall of Fame. Street basketball presented with a twist. Have an available 2-on-2, 1-on-1 hoops action. Head straight to playing or set a series of options to tweak to your liking. It is a highly competitive and challenging game. While having the option of playing cooperatively or competitively with a second player is a part of all the choices available, the one-player game dazzles too. Well-presented court environments rotate among 3 different settings with large detailed sprites. Players move fluidly across the courts with smooth animation and responsive controls. Combing skill, dexterity, and a touch of luck, you race against the clock and your opponents in obtaining the highest score possible. Respecting negatives of the game, the power-up system is somewhat off balance at times. Infrequent on occasion, it is fairly easy to accumulate too many or too few of them, resulting in a gaping distance in abilities among the players. When that transpires, pokey sound effects would be welcome over the TIA ones that are present. Although really not needed, pokey background melody could have notched up the fun and enticement of this title even further. Nevertheless, even for those of you who do not have an interest in basketball and typically do not take an interest in sport titles, this is still a fun game to play for the beginner or even most expert of players. The referee flinging knives indiscriminately onto the court is a great element in the game, and by the way, he flings the knives a lot. Little touches such as the background particulars, including spectators talking to each other, various windows and lights being on in the buildings, and details found on the cars stacked in the junkyards, really put a polish on this title. Junkyard and polish, I didn't know they go together, but it does. It keeps you coming back for more, whether alone or with a friend. It's definitely one to own on your 7800 library. I think that's the most anyone's ever said about that game. But wait, now we get to hear about Midnight Mutants, which is one of his specialties. Midnight Mutants is an answer in spades. How well the 7800 can handle large-scale game. Combining subtle RPG elements, this action-adventure is fairly big, accompanying excellent graphics, well-rendered TIA sound, and a captivating storyline. Highlights include some awesome, huge boss battles. Radioactive material exudes from the hideous and enormous mutant ram, formerly known as Simon Yeager. By means of telekinesis, the deadly material is thrown at you while the ram protects its one vulnerability, rocking back and forth in both displeasure and anger. By the way, as you're playing the game, they will give you like little hints and background stories on the characters. There's text along the screen and it tells you some of these things. A monster mutated gigantic skull is all that remains of Damon Muller attacking, with eyeballs having blood vessels dangling behind. Approaching the various velocities and trajectories, their pace becomes even more difficult to determine and avoid as the skull is constantly changing its distance from you. All that fits on the screen is the bust of the larger-than-life final boss, Dr. Evil. He moves in a hypnotic sway trance, forming a Cthulhu-like creatures, often a dozen at a time. I hope I said that right. Created from the Doctor's mind, probably didn't. They exit via his ear canals, and some on occasions even attack directly from the sides for a distance but focused attack. Downsides include absolutely it could have used pokey sound, well every game almost could have, to make the game shine further. A save game feature would assist quelling the trepidation some could possibly have regarding being able to complete the game. 1 or 2 more boss battles would have also been nice to have seen included. Wandering around in the beginning of the game can get you killed quickly and you need to follow Grandpa's advice. Nonetheless, extensive areas to explore, conquer, and numerous landscapes and scrolling backgrounds promoting a gripping, engaging game. The isometric screen, like Escape from Planet of the Robot Monsters perspective, may provide an additional layer of challenge for some, including targeting. However, it also serves as a nice change from the typical top-down platformer and truly adds to this Hall of Fame title for the 7800. Side note, supplemental material for the game here. He made like this big strategy guide. He has a video of a walkthrough on YouTube. So if you want to see a strategy guide It looks really nice. Go ahead and it's like maps. It's like basically a game player's guide, if you will. Go check out the feedback on the forums on Atari Age and search for it. You'll be glad you did. Soul Blazer from the SNES podcast. I didn't call it sneeze. I was good. Basketbrawl. This feels like an earlier version of NBA Jam NFL Blitz, a game that would have been popular in later years. It is a simple concept that takes basketball and adds in the wild and rough, no holds barred, and very few rules approach to it. Graphics, very good. The characters are large and detailed. The colors work for a pleasing to the eye experience. And the details on the background and the objects, such as the cracks in the pavement, very impressive. Not much music, well, just at the beginning, but what's there sounds okay. I like the sounds they used in the game. The whole overall look and feel really captures the time period very well, and also helps with the punks and the rough clothing and the graffiti, and helps sell the overall game as being a rough and tumble game of basketball. Controls handle well, and I enjoy all the options on the option screens. I like the fact that there are power-ups in the game, but they don't seem to appear very often, and it's hard to know what they do. Well, now you do. If you listened, you know. However, with all the game options here, it's easy for anyone to pick up a game and enjoy it, even if you don't like basketball. I had a lot of fun with it. I also really like how there are different courts you can play on. My main complaint is that as a basketball fan, I don't like the ball physics used. You can make shots here you could never make in a real game. The shots don't feel right at all, and sometimes it can be hard to get the ball to drop even when it looks like a perfect shot. Some music during gameplay would have been nice also. All in all, this is a really fun alternative sports game, and it's one of the better titles on the system. Too bad it came out so late in the system's lifetime. Hardly anyone saw it due to that. Rating solid. Midnight Mutants. Speaking of great games no one saw, we have here the last game released on the 7800's lifetime in the US. I've said before how I think one of the biggest weaknesses in the 7800 library is too many older ports of computer games and not enough new original games. Also, Atari didn't seem to understand the types of games that were popular on the NES and Sega Master System: platformers, action games, and RPGs. Either they didn't want to spend the money to make good original games, or they felt that they offered games of different types that they could draw in gamers. Sadly, this approach didn't work, and when great original games like Midnight Mutants did finally come out, it was too little too late. And I'll stop here for a second. I think what happened is Jack Tramiel leaned on, well, he used Atari's arcade conversions, okay? And then what he did was he tried to do the Commodore 64 thing, and he ported a bunch of computer-like games like Ace of Aces and such like that. And you're right, gamers moved on. And I think they realized that, but it was too late when they did realize that, because it happened so quickly. The 7800 wasn't really around that long, that by the time, once you change plans, it takes a while to find people to make the games and produce them. And even once you have the game made, then you have to, talk to Scott and have him write up the manual and all these things. And by the time it came out, the system was already dead. And that's just a sad thing. If they would have started like this, it might have been a little bit of a different story. I don't know if anything could have stopped Nintendo in America, but this would have helped them get a better share of the market and maybe help them with their next system. Maybe the Panther would have came out. The only RPG for the system, well, it's an action RPG like Zelda, but I'm sure no one called it that at the time. I was really impressed when I first played the game via emulation several years ago. I would have loved it if this game came out on the NES. There's so many things it did right. Unique, interesting, goofy story, great graphics, fun gameplay, items to find and puzzles to solve, and hints and quips given to the player at the top of the screen. Also the fact that you don't have just one, but two health meters, a health point gauge and a blood purity gauge. It is really neat concept, quite ahead of its time. And bosses, there's actually boss fights in this game. My only complaint with this game is the lack of a password system to save your progress. This is a long game to play in one system and makes playing it in emulation much easier due to save states. The music is nice, but it gets old and grating on your ears after a while. The controls feel a bit loose, and the hit detection seems to be slanted a bit in the AI's favor. It's also a tough game, very tough game. Still, it's a great game, very unique for the 7800, in some ways ahead of its time of other games of its type when it came out. To make room for this, I'm bumping Ace of Aces down to solid and putting Midnight Mutants in my fifth and final Hall of Fame game, rating Hall of Fame. And then Dauber says, if I recall, that's not too much far from the truth. More than likely, Basketbrawl was a knockoff of the arcade game Arch Rivals, a Basketbrawl. If I'm not mistaken, the basketball engine used in Arch Rivals was eventually recycled and developed into NBA Jam. So there you go. All right, let's go to some audio submissions I got. First up is Richard the Prisoner.
Hey Phil, This is Richard, the prisoner, and so we're down to the last two games, and the last one I ever owned, which was Basketbrawl, which, since it came out in '90, that definitely puts me in Cupertino. I think we got it from the what's that book? The Sears Roebuck catalog, I think. I don't really know. I can't recall all what happened 26 years ago that well. But as far as I can, I picked that one over Ninja Golf, and Ninja Golf is good. I don't argue that one. In fact, it's definitely in the top 10. I haven't decided exactly where I'm going to put everything on the Hall of Fame, but whether it's going to be this one or that, whether it's going to be Basketball, Ninja Golf, or like Midnight Madness, which I haven't really had a chance to play, even though I do have it on the emulator on here. But the thing I like about Basketball, and I never knew about that it sort of stole from Arch Rivals, this arcade game by Midway that I'd never even heard of and didn't even know about until earlier this year when I was listening to some of the old podcasts on arcade, No Quarter and Pie Factory. If it was for that, I probably wouldn't have made that guess. But the thing I like about it is the opening intro screen and the music, which is very good for the non-Pogi Chip 7800. Probably the best case of like 2600 music in that way. And the fact that you can play this game, a multiplayer game, 2-player, where you basically, play basketball, which involves beating people up and avoiding referees throwing knives at you, which I never fully got that, but weird, really. So, I'm still figuring out where exactly I can put this game, because I was going to put it in Hall of Fame, but then I think about it, it's like, I don't know if it is quite Hall of Fame. It's close. Again, I'm still going through a little bit of Ninja Golf and Midnight Madness. Those are very close to being on the edge. So I have the other games ready, and I'll have that episode, of course, ready after you do the homebrew and prototype one. So at the moment, I'm going to reserve my ranking of Basketball to decide fully. It's definitely solid. That's at the very least. Like I said, top 10 more than likely. But besides that, I'd have to think about it a little bit if it goes into the Hall of Fame. But it is pretty close. So will be in a couple weeks when you bring up the top, our Hall of Fames and our trashes. My trash is set, but the Hall of Fame has one spot where I'm sort of fighting. Three games are being put in between that. So once I can figure that out, then I'll take care of that. But for now, we'll just sort of leave this in that precarious, solid at least, maybe Hall of Fame. I haven't gone again. So that's all I have for this week. So I'll see you in episode, 32, I think? Yeah, 32. So be seeing you.
Thanks, as always, Richard. Really do appreciate that audio submission. And yeah, a lot of us, we got to think about what we're going to put in the Hall of Fame. And I also want people to think about what they're going to put in the trash bin. So in a couple episodes, I want you guys to send me in your top 5 games in order and your bottom 5 games. And we're going to tabulate the votes, put it all together, and come up with a definitive, the 5 best games on the system and the 5 games to avoid. So yeah, everyone's got to think about that. I got to think about that a little bit. I know some of them, but not all. And you said you may got it out of Sears catalog, and I guess it's possible. Sears, had a lot going on. I know Radio Shack. You could get this game out of a Radio Shack catalog. I know that, one of the supplemental catalogs. And the fact that you didn't know about how it might be ripping off Arch Rivals, Richard was one of my earliest supporters on Patreon, and he got to pick a reward where he picked a game I could review on the No Swear Gamer YouTube show, and he picked Dodge'em. And when I was preparing for that, I didn't realize that Dodge'em was based on another arcade game. I think there's one by Sega that it was I can't remember right now, but it was based on another game. And it's interesting sometimes that you play these games and you think, wow, how original. Then you find out they're based on something else. And that's why I'm like, with all the other companies that licensed out Midnight Mutants, is there some other game, Midnight Mutants? I Googled, I couldn't find it. I don't know. What was Midnight Mutants based on? There's some prototype were they going to make, was SNK going to make a Neo Geo game out of it? I don't know. It would have been interesting to find out. So anyways, thank you very much, Richard. Next up is Lewis from Cool and Unusual Games on YouTube.
Hey Phil, what's up? It's Lewis from Cool and Unusual Game Reviews over on YouTube. Midnight Mutants. Wow, it's a strange game. I never really got that far into it, but it seems fairly impressive for a 7800 game. And the same kind of goes for Scrapyard Dog, which I kind of neglected to write in about. But yeah, I couldn't get into either of those. Scrapyard Dog, they're trying to do Mario, but the setting is a little bit too realistic, I think. There's not really enough to jump on. It's kind of dreary and not that fun, and your character kind of is, as I think was touched on in the episode, is a bit unappealing. Technologically speaking, it's pretty impressive and kind of shows that the 7800 can do games that are like the games on the NES, if not maybe even a little bit better in the color area. And the same goes for Midnight Mutants, but both of those feel to me kind of like the quality of an unlicensed NES game. And I don't know if it's because of budget or how many people were on the project. Like a game like Castlevania, I'm sure, had a team of dedicated artists and, maybe more than one programmer. Those NES games are these really professional, slick creations. To make a game that's really good, like Food Fight, takes way less effort, man hours, than a game like Contra. It's just way more complicated. There's more tuning involved. And I think on top of that, Western dev houses were better at different style of games than what was popular, in Japan, where, all these NES games were coming from. And I think a lot of times people at Atari would look at what was on the NES and kind of have a very superficial idea of what made it tick. Midnight Mutants, on the other hand, seems more like a home computer game. Again, the quality just seems a little bit off to me, and I haven't invested that much time. It might be a really fun adventure, so I'm really looking forward to your coverage of that, because maybe it'll cause me to want to pop it back in again. Anyway, thanks, Phil, and again, looking forward to the next episode. Thanks.
No, thank you. Great submission, as always. Scrapyard Dog, I never thought of it as dreary, but I think you're right. It does kind of feel like a dreary game. I mean, you're spending half the time in the sewers and it's not very bright or anything. Not that the 7800 colors were often bright, but yeah, it's definitely dreary. And the fact that you said it felt like an unlicensed NES game, interesting. I could kind of see that. Midnight Mutants, I guess maybe I'm just a little bit different. I thought it was really pushing the system to its limits. I thought the large bosses looked really good. The sound I thought was really good. I do think it's very entertaining. It's a game that if I had more time or if I had it as a kid, I would have probably highly enjoyed it. I actually thought it plays pretty good. I think a save feature would have definitely helped. And you have to know what you're doing. If you just go at it, pick up and play, this game is not pick up and play. You actually have to know kind of what you're doing. Maybe watch a walkthrough video or read a guide like Trevor did. But interesting kind of thought on, was this West Studios versus Japan style kind of thing going on? But I would recommend that you pop it in and give it some time and maybe try and understand, at least give yourself like, okay, what's the first 3 things I have to do in the game? Okay, I got to find the cross or the key, or I forget off the top of my head, and go from there. It's a game that I would like to go back to. I'm a busy adult. I'm a father. I don't have time all the time just to sit down and pop in an hour. And what some of the people have said about, I don't want to start at the beginning. It's a long game and I don't want to start at the beginning. That I had that feeling several times preparing for the show. It's like, I should play it again, but I just don't want to start again and commit another 20, 30 minutes and just to get a few more, 5 more minutes deeper into the game. Again, if I was a kid and had lots of time, great. But as an adult, really kind of hard to do. But I do recommend you try it again. All right, next up is Janitor Sean from the Pie Factory. Yeah, I know he has a different name each week, but here, he's always Janitor Sean. Janitor Sean, take it away.
You know what, Phil? In listening to your podcast and Ferg's podcast, it's interesting that they introduce the audio contribution with the name of the contributor, but then you usually hear the contributor say, "Oh, hey Ferg, hey Phil, it's Bob," even though we already know that. So I'm not going to say who I am, since chances are you will already introduce me. It's kind of like how when you're watching, say, a celebrity Q&A, and they'll say, "Okay, Mr. Reynolds, and this is Jill from South Carolina," and then she gets up and she says, "Hi, this is Jill." It's like, yeah, we already know. Anyway. So I wanted to share my thoughts on Basketbrawl. My thoughts on the game itself, not really a heck of a lot that I have to say. I mean, it could be a fun game with one exception. Now, I haven't heard what you've said up to this point yet, obviously, because my flux capacitor doesn't work. But this game is a ripoff of Arch Rivals, one of my favorite, it's not really a 90s game, but I played it a lot in the 90s. And in fact, the full name of Arch Rivals is Arch Rivals, a Basketbrawl. And Arch Rivals actually predates Basketbrawl, which makes me think that Basketbrawl must be a ripoff of it, because it's pretty much the same thing. You beat people up and you try to play basketball and all that stuff. But having said that, if it weren't an Arch Rivals ripoff, this would be a really fun game. It would definitely be a solid game. But because it's obviously an Arch Rivals ripoff, and there's some elements just missing. Like, for example, you can't de-pants your opponent in Basketbrawl. I'm just going to give it a meh. Just a meh. But anyway, I have an interesting story that I would like to tell. I think I've told you this privately, but I'd like to share it with your listeners as well. For years, I had been, probably about 23 years, I think, through various other forums, I was in communication with a guy named Scott. This is totally unrelated to Atari. We're Brian Wilson fans, so we've been kind of going back and forth with each other on various Beach Boys and Brian Wilson fan forums. And one day on Facebook, when I mentioned Atari, he private messaged me and said, "You know what? I used to work for Atari. I used to be a technical writer there. If you want to see some of my work, check out the manual for the Atari 7800 Basketbrawl." He said, "See if you can spot my work." And so I actually bought a copy of Basketbrawl on eBay, a CIB copy, just so I could do that. I mean, yeah, I could go to Atari Age, but, who has time in today's economy? So I'm looking through and I see there's a character here named Bruce Bruiser Johnson. Bruce Johnson. This is interesting here because there's a Beach Boy named Bruce Johnston. So that was one little giveaway that I saw right there. And what I love here is Tommy Biff Torrance. Now, obviously, Torrance, Torrance, is a town in California. And it says here, first surfed when he was knee-high to a sea lion. Growing up in Southern California was like living in paradise. Great. And part of me wants to think that was also a tribute to Dean Torrance, Torrence. He's the dean of Jan and Dean. And if you look in the bio here, then his dad got transferred to New York. At first, Biff was totally stoked. He thought Long Island would be surrounded by gnarly waves. When he hit the city, he was bummed to the max. Now, I noticed that as a Scott Rhodes touch again, because that seems dangerously close to the lyrics of a song called New York is a Lonely Town, in which the singer of the song is discussing how he's from California, but his dad got transferred for work or whatever. They moved over to New York, and he found that he's not really finding all the waves, which is kind of interesting. I lived on the Jersey Shore for about 8 years, and there were definitely surfers down there. So maybe just an hour down the train, he could have found some fellow surfers. But oh well. And that song, little trivia for there, was by a group named the Tradewinds, and Mad Men fans might recognize the name the Tradewinds because in one episode of Mad Men, when Harry was trying to hire the Rolling Stones to perform a jingle for a commercial, he was so stoned that he accidentally hired the opening act, the Tradewinds. So that's a little trivia there. But going back to my friend Scott, but yeah, he worked for Atari during the Trammell era. He didn't do a heck of a lot of work on the 7800 stuff. I think he told me he did most of his stuff on the Lynx. So I'm guessing this same material will be in the Lynx version as well. But since I'm not a Lynx guy, I really don't know. But anyway, just thought I'd share that with you. Wow, your show's coming to an end soon, Phil. God, we're going to miss you. At least I am. I'm sure everybody else is too. Glad you still have your No Swear Gamer channel on YouTube. I'm absolutely excited to see more stuff coming from that. So anyway, thank you for all you do, Phil. And you'll probably hear from me again. You've been warned.
Yes, we have. Hey, that was a great audio submission, and you're right, because you said how, on my show and on Ferg's show, we introduce who's coming up, and then sometimes they introduce themselves. And what's funny is when I introduced Richard and Lewis, it was an echo. It was almost an echo, because I said, here's Richard the Prisoner. Hi, Phil, it's Richard the Prisoner. So it was almost, hey, it's Lewis from Cool and Unusual Game. Hey, it's Lewis from, it was almost the same thing. And I was almost laughing, listening. Spoiler alert, when I do these audio submissions, usually what I do is I get them, but I don't listen to them until I do the recording. So what you're hearing is basically my live reaction right after hearing it. I don't like take copious notes and listen to it over and over again. I just pop it in, play it, maybe jot a couple things down I want to mention as they're talking, and there we go. So thanks for all that trivia and the Scott Rhodes, more insight on Mr. Scott Rhodes. I can't remember from the interview when he quit Atari, because Basketbrawl on the Links came out I believe it was a few years later, so it's possible he may have left by then. So he might not have done the Basketbrawl manual, but the person who did it may have taken liberties from the 7800 manual, which I thought was really well done, and I didn't realize all the Beach Boys musical references in there, because that's not my forte, but that... Get it? Forte, musical. Anyway, so, thanks for all that trivia and insight. And yeah, I didn't realize the Arch Rivals was called Arch Rivals of Basketbrawl. Very interesting. Yeah, I really believe this was a ripoff, a copy, whatever, inspired by Arch Rivals. And I really enjoyed the arcade game Arch Rivals. And, but I'll let you know my opinions on this afterward, but I agree with a lot of what you said, and look forward to hearing in the future what more you have to say. Mwahaha. Anyways, it's time for everyone's part of the show. It's time for Shinto Says.
What can I say about Midnight Mutants? Nothing. I've got nothing. I don't own it, and I've never played it, so I'll move on to Basketbrawl instead. What can I say about Basketbrawl? Nothing. Well, very little. I don't own it, and I've never played this one, but I do recall one day in June of 1990, I was walking through Target flipping through an issue of GamePro magazine. It had the links listed on the top banner, and that's what I was after. I was looking for information on the links. Really wanted one of those. But there wasn't much of anything on the links in that issue, just a 2-page ad. But what GamePro did have was a review of a new Atari 7800 game called Basketbrawl. I thought Atari was pretty much done with the 7800 by this point, and really surprised that there was a new game coming out, and that it would get a magazine review as well. I read the review, showed it to my brother, who was probably equally surprised. My brother is big into basketball, and still is, but we didn't try to get this game, even if we could find it in stores, which we never did. It certainly wasn't there at Target. My brother did go on to buy Basketbrawl, but for the links, and he seemed to think that it was an okay game, but I don't think he ever really got into it. We did have 2 Lynxes at that point, but only 1 copy of the game, so the lack of a head-to-head multiplayer probably made a big difference in fun factor. Maybe we should have made more of an effort to track down that 7800 version after all.
Maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. It seems that the Lynx version would be better, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. I need to play the Lynx version. Well, I don't need to, but it'd be interesting to play it and find out. And remember, kids, that a little Shinto is better than no Shinto at all. So thanks, Shinto. Really appreciate that. And I guess I forgot to use the word favorite. So thank you for that part of the show, because I just called it's time for everyone's part of the show, because everyone's part of the show is Shinto Says. All right. Anyway, let me tell you real quick GamePro story since you brought that up. I actually found the very first issue of GamePro as a kid at a garage sale, and I believe they had a review of Desert Falcon in there. I think they had a little bit of 7800 coverage, but of course after that 7800 didn't get a lot of coverage anywhere. And I would later grow into an Electronic Gaming Monthly fan more than GamePro, even though I was well aware of GamePro. And I actually, when I had a Sega Genesis, I had a subscription to Sega Visions magazine, which was like their answer to Nintendo Power, but not nearly as popular. And they eventually decided to shut down. But what they did for subscribers is if you had any remaining issues, they automatically transferred you to becoming a GamePro subscriber. So I unintentionally became a short-term GamePro subscriber, and that's my GamePro story. Aren't you glad you listened to that one? Okay, so what do I think of the games? Let's talk about Basketbrawl. Now, like I said, I liked Arch Rivals, the arcade game. Something in Basketbrawl, to me personally, was a little bit off. It was missing that something that you can't say. It's like, it's just something's missing. It's like Arch Rivals, but something's missing about. I don't know what's missing. I found myself playing it just punching guys instead of focusing on the basketball. My strategy was knock out the other team and then score baskets, and that seemed to work best for me. But I just didn't have a lot of fun with it. Maybe if I played it multiplayer, I think if I was a kid and my neighbor came over, we would have had a lot of fun playing this game. But today it's a meh. I'm sorry. I'd rather play one-on-one basketball. I really would. I had a lot of fun with that, and I might be in the minority. So if it sounds interesting to you, check it out. But for me, it's like, that's just where I'm at. Midnight Mutants, it's a very high solid to me. It's a little dark for my taste personally. But the gameplay is really good. I think I really wish I had a save feature, but I'm going to give it a very high solid. If it could have been Hall of Fame, if you could save it, or password it, that would have been something special. But for me, it's going to be a solid. But it's definitely a shame that games, technically, I think it's not near the top. Technically, it's a really impressive game, and it really could show what the 7800 could do, in my opinion. Some people thought it seemed like a lesser title. I guess it's, beauty's in the eye of the beholder kind of deal, but I think the presentation is really good. I like the manuals in both of these games too. I think these are two of the better manuals, which is something. I don't know that it's got anything to do with Midnight Mutants, but I thought the background story was very well done, and they gave it a lot of time. So there you go. Basketbrawl, Midnight Mutants. I think overall people said Basketbrawl is kind of like a solid, low solid. Some Hall of Fames, and Midnight Mutants is a higher solid with the more Hall of Fame mentions. So both games would be recommended. All right, so we're getting to the end of the show. This is actually the last regular standard 2 games that originally came out episode. My next episode, thanks to Cover Art Kevin, and Kevin, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, is going to be the Prototypes episode, not Homebrews, Prototypes. That's going to be saved for something else. Prototypes, I'm going to cover 4 prototypes, and it's going to be a little different. I'm going to cover Plutos, Sirius, Clax, and Missing in Action. Here's the deal. If you want to talk about any of the prototypes in general, if you want to give me your opinions, maybe you want to talk a little Toki or whatever, send me an email at Atari7800podcast@AOL.com. That's Atari7800podcast@AOL.com. Send me an email. I'm only going to do submissions I get through email. I'm not going to put posts this time on Atari.io or Atari Age because it's a prototype episode. I feel weird rating a game. I don't want to give it Hall of Fame or solid if it's not finished. And that's just kind of where I sit on this thing. So since they're prototypes, if you have opinions on them or other prototypes, go ahead, send it in to me. I will use it. Now, not homebrews, prototypes. I'm just talking prototypes. Send it in to me and I'll discuss it on the show. Otherwise, it's just going to be talking about the games, and if that's all it is, that's fine. It's kind of like a bonus. It's almost more of a bonus episode than a regular episode. And I'm going to do a few things a little different with it. After that, we're going to do the Hall of Fame and Trash Bin episode, where you give me your top 5 in order games and bottom 5 in order games and when I say bottom 5, like number 1 will be the worst game. So, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for both of them. I'd appreciate if you start thinking about that and send them in whenever you're ready to. And we're coming to the end of the road. I do apologize. I know the episodes have been taking longer. Ever since I moved, things have been very, very busy, and I've had a hard time finding the time late at night, or I've been extremely tired. I guess it happens when you have 3 children, and a life going on. But I thank you for your patience. Thank you so much for putting up with me and waiting for me. I wish I could have done this every other week or even weekly. I wish I could have been a little bit more regular with this, but I guess the show just didn't have enough fiber. I apologize for that, but thanks for waiting. Thanks for waiting and being patient. If you're listening to this, you've waited, and I appreciate that. All right, so you can follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/7800 Game by Game Podcast. Also, the No Swear Gamer. You can follow me on Twitter or Facebook as the No Swear Gamer. And I have a YouTube show, and I'm going to try and get some more 7800 content out, especially once the podcast runs out and I can just focus on one thing. Juggling a YouTube and a podcast can be difficult, at least in my opinion. I don't know how Willie does it. Willie juggles so much. Anyway, you can follow me as the No Swear Gamer. I'm a member of the Retro Junkies Network. You can go to the retrojunkies.com to find more retro-related shows. And let's see, I also have a Patreon account. You can go to patreon.com/NoSwearGamer. So let's quickly go over there. And I want to thank all my current Patreons. Let's see, we got Ed Ladden, Richard the Prisoner. And by the way, go to edladden.com, get a Seagull 78 adapter, and check out some of his other controllers. And you will not be disappointed. Thank you for Rob, Sean, Joe, Isaac, Gary, Greg, Rex, Robert, Jose, Brent, and Gray Defender. And be sure to check out some of their shows like the Retro League podcast, the Retro Junkies Super Show, Pie Factory podcast, the SNES podcast. Thank you to all those guys who do it, and Great Defender on YouTube. If I'm missing any of your shows, I apologize. Let me know, and I will definitely give you a plug next time. So, yeah, I guess this is it for now, guys. So remember, games are fun, but always keep first things first. I will catch you later. You know what? I think it's time that I finally had a cup of cappuccino. I know the machine's been broken, but I'm finally going to do it. Let's just go over and turn this on and voice.